Hello and welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi. It's February 2nd, 2026, and today we bring you a special edition dedicated entirely to the Union Budget 2026-2027. We will walk you through a structured analysis of the budget, key announcements, sectoral priorities, fiscal signals, and what they mean for the growth, welfare, reform, and macro stability of our country, all from a UPSC prelims and mains perspective. Alongside, we have prepared prelims pointers, which are highly crucial for the upcoming prelims 2026 examination. So, with this, let us begin. Hello guys, welcome back to a special edition of The Analyst, where we are going to have a complete breakdown of the Union Budget 2026. Now, in this budget, the Government of India has stressed heavily on the capital expenditure side, alongside announcing various major manufacturing initiatives. We are also trying to focus on regional empowerment and growth, focusing also on the vulnerable sections of the population. So, these will be the various major themes which we are going to uncover in this discussion today, which are highly crucial for your prelims and mains examination. Also, when you talk about the various other papers of the GS, Union Budget and the various policies announced have far-reaching consequences. So guys, let us start with understanding the importance of budget in the examination. Firstly, if you look at the 2024 prelims PYQ here, you will actually understand how UPSC is going to ask you the questions pertaining to budgets in the country. So if you know the answer, let me know in the comments below. Also, a very important trend is seen in the mains examination regarding the major changes in taxation policies or the various other measures proposed in various previous budgets were asked in the mains examination. Furthermore, the very basic things, for example, what is a capital budget, what is a revenue budget, and the components of the same were asked in 2021 mains examination. So, we can actually understand how important the topic of budget is, both from the perspective of prelims and mains. So that is why today I am going to start with the very basic concepts. Firstly, if you look at the definition of budget, this is all for my friends who have just started preparation. And here you have to understand, guys, that imagine that you have a pocket money which your parents have given you for 1 month to run, right? So this is how you will be managing your expenditures. You will be trying to managing your spending, right? So this is exactly what the government does. Government in a year announces its own pocket money that is contained within the budget. So this is actually, when you talk about the official definition, if you want to write a definition in your mains examination, it is a statement of the estimated receipts, which is the income, and the estimated expenditure, that is the spending of the government of India for the coming financial year. So for the coming year, the government is already trying to estimate on which areas it is going to spend pertaining to the various strategic interests, various welfare interests, various infrastructural needs of the country. So this is where we have divided the budget into two simple categories. Firstly, we had the receipt side. Receipt means it is the process by which the government receives money. Similar to the pocket money you receive from your parents, the government receives money in two ways. First is the revenue receipt, second is the capital receipt. Now guys, I want a very basic thing to be clarified to all of you at this moment right now. Whenever any question comes regarding revenue receipts or capital receipts and you're confused into choosing what kind of expenditures fall into either of the things, you have to understand one simple term, that is the asset and liability relationship. For example, when we talk our own, say, wealth, assets generally mean land, property, gold, stocks, bonds. So these are the various things which we own ourselves, and those kind of assets can give us further income in the future, maybe. So this is also something which the government also decides, that which are their assets and which are not their assets. On the other hand, liabilities are those things which you do not own. For example, say loans. If you take a loan from a bank, the money is of the banks, not your own. You have a liability to pay the money back, pay the principal back to the bank on a very regular period of time. So this is exactly what we mean by assets and liabilities. But when we talk about the revenue receipts, they do not talk about any kind of assets or any kind of liabilities. These are the daily kind of normal kind of things that the government receives from the people, that is us, in the form of taxes, in the form of non-tax revenue too. Taxes, you know, it can be in the form of direct, that is income taxes, or indirect, that is the GST. Also, non-revenue can be from, say, the government runs various PSUs, right? The incomes that the government earn from them is a kind of a non-tax revenue because the government does not tax the PSUs for that. Also, the various interests that the government of India receives on the loans that the government of India or the central government has given to the various state government, and in return that the state government will be giving various interest. So this interest part is actually a part of the revenue receipt, not the loan part, not the principal part. Principal will be actually form of the capital side. Also, when we talk about the various loans that the government of India gives to maybe Sri Lanka, maybe Bhutan, maybe various other countries, those are also, for example, when we talk about the interest that we receive from them, they are also part of the revenue receipt, right? Now, when we go to the capital side here, capital receipts actually lead to the reduction of some asset or say the increase of some liability. For example, imagine a scenario where you are taking a loan from a bank, so you are increasing your liability. So similarly, when the government is actually receiving some money from the institutions such as banks or various foreign governments or say some foreign institutions, this is actually where the government receives some money, but that money increases the liability. Also, when we talk about say any kind of asset that the government sells, for example, so the government right now is selling so many PSUs, right, as a form of its strategic disinvestment. So that is where the government will be receiving money, but that money is coming at the cost of reduction in the assets of various government, because the government is selling maybe the machinery, maybe the land, maybe the various aspects of the PSUs. This is where the government actually tries to receive money under the capital receipt side, right? So borrowing, disinvestment, and also the recovery of loans. These are all the ways in which we can actually categorize the capital receipts under. Now, when we look into the other side, that is where the expenditure lies. That is where we have to understand, guys, that the government of India actually spends more than it receives. And that is why we are going to understand in this budget majorly what are the major trends of expenditure too. Now, firstly, let us understand, mainly for our beginner friends here. Firstly, when we talk about the revenue expenditure, again, guys, remember that formula. In the revenue sides, both receipts and expenditure, there is no asset, no liability which is created, right? So this is, for example, so the day-to-day expenditures of the government that the government definitely has to spend, right? For example, if you talk about your day-to-day lives, you have to buy food, you have to travel, you have to say buy notebooks, because these are your day-to-day usual expenditures. So this is where, for example, the government generally spends on salaries, pensions, subsidies, interest payments, which are actually the biggest expense, because in the past we have had taken so many loans, and the interest payments we are still doing right now, right? The major difference between receipts and expenditure on the revenue side, for example, when we talk about the interest side here, the interest, if we receive from the state governments or from the various international governments, that is a form of revenue receipt. But if the government of India has taken some loans, it is part of the revenue expenditure, because we are spending interests out of our own consolidated fund of India, right? Now, we also have defense running costs such as fuel, food for our soldiers. They are also categorized under revenue expenditure. Now, guys, this is where the government of India is actually focused on. The most important thing perhaps in the recent decade and also in the future decades to come, which we generally term as capital expenditure or CAPEX. CAPEX means simply the government is building various new roads, various new schools, various new airports, various new assets, or maybe the government is paying back the previous loans, so it is reducing its liabilities. So this is exactly what we understand by capital expenditure, and the more of it, the good it is for the economy, because generally when we talk about capital expenditure, it is actually the investment part we are talking about, right? So maybe the government is increasing its investment, and you know that investment, when we try to increase the same, it leads to positive impact on our GDP, because it creates various future new assets, wherein these assets can be actually be used by the common person, by the business people in the country and also from abroad. So this is exactly why the government of India right now is focused on making India a developed country by 2047. And that period from now on, for example, say 2026 to 2047 is actually the period of our Amrit Kal. This is where we will be undertaking so many initiatives, so many infrastructural projects, so many welfare projects to actually make India a developed country by 2047. Now, whatever we have covered till now, this can be summed up in this 2025 prelims PYQ, and that is why I go into so many basics, because the basics are the most crucial points where the UPSC examiners attack while asking you questions, right? It is not the various hard statistics or the various detailed government initiatives that they focus on in most of the question. It is actually the absolute basics that they focus on. Now, we have covered the theory part. Let us now look into the data on our receipts and our expenditure. Firstly, let us actually look into the expenditure side. Now, this is where we are trying to understand where we are trying to spend the most of the money. We are actually spending most of the money by giving our various share of the center to the state government in the form of the taxes that they would receive, right? Because the various taxes that India, or say the government of India, collects, they are not only remaining with the central government, they have to be distributed with the states, right? Because we are actually following a form of a fiscal federalism. Fiscal federalism means that the taxes which the government collects, they must be divided vertically first, that is between the center and the states. Also, the states and the revenues that the state governments would receive, that would actually determine the horizontal devolution. So the money that is firstly flowing from the center must be going to all the states, that is a form of the vertical devolution. Now, when the money is actually going to the state governments, which states which receive how much money or less or greater, that would be determined by the horizontal devolution. We are going to come into this kind of concept in the second article. Now, firstly, you should know that the state governments or the state share of taxes actually is the highest expenditure that we do. Next comes the interest payments, followed by the central sector scheme, where the central government is spending 100% of the funds in various schemes. In the comments, you can actually let me know examples of 5-6 initiatives which are actually under central sector schemes. Also, if you see, 11% of our expenditures actually almost go to the defense sector, right? Then comes the centrally sponsored schemes, the finance commission and other transfers, and various other expenditures apart from the major subsidies. Also, now if you are trying to expend this kind of money, if you are trying to spend this kind of money, where the money is coming from? The money is mainly coming from the borrowings, as you can see here, guys. So majority of the money that actually the government spends is actually in the form of loans, then the income tax, then the corporation tax, then GST, then non-tax. Finally, we have various other kinds of receipts. So you can actually understand, guys, this is what the trends of our expenditures are, and prelims examination can actually ask you this kind of trends, right? Maybe they can also ask you to arrange the various expenditures in the order of increasing to decreasing expenditures. Also, if you can see right now in this present budget, right? If you see, we are actually a welfare state. We believe in the welfare of the people, and that is why we actually trying to spend a lot of money on government schemes, on capital expenditure. So our spending is always more than our receipts. Now, if you can see the historical average from 1996 till around 2026, in this 30 odd years, our expenditures have always stayed above our receipts. And also, if you have seen during the 2020 COVID pandemic year, our expenditure skyrocketed. And since then, it is on a consistent decline. That means that, for example, during such crisis, the government has an obligation to spend more money. Such as COVID, you have seen how we have spent money for the Atmanirbhar Bharat, for various food security missions, and etc. This is where right now we are coming to normalcy, and that is why we are trying to decrease the spending. Also, if you have seen in the recent times, the budget's absolute amount of money which the government is spending, that is coming down, right? And if you can see from 2021 to 2026, the total budget outlay is consistently declining for the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and maybe the 6th year. So this is exactly what you have to keep in mind. Even prelims sometimes ask you various questions like whether some data is consistently increasing or not, or decreasing or not. Now, for example, if you are talking about the expenditure side of the budget here. We are actually talking about capital expenditure, as we have already told. For example, if you see from 2016 to around 2020-21 during the COVID pandemic, the focus of the government shifted from spending more on the welfare schemes to spending more on the capex, that is the capital expenditure. Because if you see that the blue section right now in more future periods of time, it is actually increasing as actually compared to the share of the revenue expenditure. Earlier when the revenue expenditure was more than 80%, right now it has come down at 78. So this is where you can actually take down this data too. Also, when we talk about where all these receipts are coming from majorly, so receipts majorly earlier used to come from our indirect taxes, right, such as GST. Earlier it was the value added taxes, the VAT. Gradually, if you see, the income tax share was quite low previously, right now it is increasing. Also, if you see, when we talk about the GST, right, so GST is actually leading us to a lot of revenue, but also we have various other taxes apart from GST such as customs, duties. That is also a kind of a, say, contribution that we are seeing right now. Also, if you see, corporate tax is a major revenue. So these are the major revenue sides of the government of India. Now, when we talk about the health report of the government, this is perhaps the most crucial data which we can actually take away from the budget. This is actually what we talk about the deficit side. Now, when we talk about the fiscal deficit, the revenue deficit, these are actually the favorite topics of UPSC. I'm going to show you a PYQ, rather two PYQs in the next slide. Now, firstly, all of us know that the budget deficit is nothing but the total expenditure minus the receipts, because always, kind of in our history, we have had a deficit because we spent more rather than we earned, right? So this is exactly what we have to understand, that budget deficits are quite normal. But there is a problem with budget deficit, guys. When we talk about the budget deficit, we also talk about the loans that we took to fill up the deficit, right? So that is why in the fiscal deficit side, we actually have to minus the borrowings that we have taken to fill the deficit before, right? So this is exactly why the fiscal deficit is actually talking about, the total kind of deficit of our country. When we talk about the excess of spending over receipts minus the borrowings, right? So this is exactly what we have to keep in mind for fiscal deficit. Now, when we talk about the revenue deficit, it is only talking about the revenue expenditure minus revenue receipt, because you have to understand, guys, the government puts a lot of emphasis on the revenue deficit, because the government thinks that whatever we are going to earn from receipts, that is the taxes and so on, from that money we are going to actually spend on the various loans, on the various assets or capital expenditure, right? So this is exactly why the government always would like to maintain a kind of, say, healthy fiscal deficit or a lower, revenue deficit too. Because we have to understand, if the gap is too much, then the government has to take a lot of loans. And taking a lot of loans is never good for the future generations of the country. And this is what brings me to another term that is known as primary deficit, because this is actually the fiscal deficit minus the interest payments. So that is why we can understand, guys, if you had taken a lot of loans in the past, the future generations would have to spend a lot of money on just paying interest. And this is exactly why interest payments are the second largest component in the present budget. Also, the government is also trying to have a different kind of revenue deficit too. This is known as effective revenue deficit, because some kinds of expenditures that the government does in the revenue side actually sometimes end up creating assets. But you guys have just now heard me telling that, the side of our expenditures, when we talk about the revenue expenditure, right, they do not create any assets or liabilities, but sometimes the government can actually spend on various schemes, right, which can, for example, say the Manrega initiative, that can lead to the improvement of some roads or some school buildings or some government office buildings, which can indirectly also create various assets. So the various grants which are given to union territories or the state governments are actually minus from revenue deficit, and then we get the effective revenue deficit. And if you see the entire kind of trends which are happening just before your eyes right now. The fiscal deficit, the revenue deficit, effective and the primary deficits are all on a declining trajectory. We are going to discuss this in the next article in more details, but this is what the trends indicate right now. And these are the PYQs which I was talking about in 2025 prelims. If you can understand, the nature of the PYQs are actually hinting towards a numerical side. Let me know what are the answers in the comments below, right? Because this actually tests your conceptual understanding, and the people who are actually preparing for this year prelims, such questions are very important. Also, when we are talking about the health card, we can try to continue the discussion here by bringing the FRBM Act, right? The FRBM Act actually imposes various kind of limits on what kind of loans or how much of the loans the government can take, because the more number of loans, the higher the fiscal deficit, higher revenue deficit, and all kind of deficits. That is why the government should be responsible enough to spend the money by not taking more loans. And that is why, there are three statements that the government should lay before the parliament along with the budget, which was also presented yesterday. That is a macroeconomic framework statement, medium-term fiscal policy statement, and the fiscal policy strategy statement, which was also asked in 2020 question. You let me know the answers in the comments below. So if you see, as we go along, we have so many PYQs focused on the core basics, sometimes even data. Now, when we talk about the FRBM Act, firstly, the FRBM Act originally, right, it had a target of 3% of GDP. That is when it comes to fiscal deficit. That is, we should not be having a deficit more than 3% of the GDP. But as of now, that is missed. According to the last CAG report, we had fiscal deficit of 5.32%. As of now, we are trying to have fiscal deficit of around 4.3%, but still not 3% of the GDP, the deadline of which already exhausted in March 2021. Later on, the government of India during the COVID pandemic cited COVID and various economic issues and tried to extend this limit. And this is where you also understand when we talk about the government debt. Government debt ceiling would be say around 60%. That is including the state and the central government debt. Right? For example, the central government should not have more than 40% of the entire GDP, and the state government should not have 20% as debt according to the entire GDP. So that was 60%. Right now we are trying to have a target of 50%, because right now in 2027 financial year, that is 2026-27 financial year, the government is targeting 55.6%. As of now, it is at around 57%. That is actually a very good deal, because we have kind of reduced our debt over a period of time, right? So these are all the things that we have to keep in mind when we talk about the FRBM Act as of now. Now, when we talk about finally the budget here, right, there are three kartavyas or the duties that the government of India is trying to focus on. Firstly, why kartavyas? Because it was actually the very first budget that we released from the Kartavya Bhavan. And the three kartavyas, the three duties that the government of India is trying to strive for. Firstly, kartavya to accelerate and sustain economic growth, to fulfill aspirations of the people and build their capacity. And finally, Sabka Saath and Sabka Vikas. So this is where you have to understand we are going to start the part A of budget, where the three kartavyas have been systemically, thematically divided by the government of India. And that is where we are also going to understand in part-wise format. So the kartavyas are trying to focus a lot on youth-driven budget, because if we are aspiring to become a developed country, a Viksit Bharat by 2047, it will be the youth of our country, you, I, everyone, who will be trying to propel the country towards country's prosperity 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now on. So that is why the government is actually focusing a lot of investments, capital expenditure, skilling initiatives, manufacturing initiatives that will be having a future time frame. Maybe the benefits, which are actually why the various political opponents and the various other economists are also targeting the government, that if you are releasing a budget, where is the various welfare scheme expenditure? Where are the various other expenditures that the state governments need? Now the government has told, because we are striving for Viksit Bharat, we are actually having a futuristic time frame. And that is why the short term, the myopic, the electoral gain kind of initiatives are not there in this budget, if you can understand, right? So this is actually very appreciated when we talk about the main intention of the government of India. Also, the government is right now navigating complex global scenarios. We have high amount of supply chain issues internationally. We have the threat of Donald Trump's tariffs, and that is why we have so many new technologies, so many new initiatives for energy, minerals, textiles as a part of this budget, just to diversify away from such US threats. So, when we talk about the very first Kartavya, we are talking about accelerating economic growth, and hereupon we will be discussing so many initiatives, but in a very nutshell, guys, because we have a paucity of time. Firstly, when we talk about the Biopharma Shakti, so we have a budget of 10,000 crore right now over the next 5 years, where we are going to have new national institutes totally revamped to focus on the pharmaceutical sector of our country. Why, if you may ask? Because Mr. Trump's 50% tariffs do not apply as of now to the pharmaceutical industries. So the government is thinking, let us give more money to the industry, let the actually pharmaceutical setup in the country diversify to US markets too. So this is kind of an opportunity that the government is trying to upgrade 7 existing facilities, create 1,000 plus clinical trial sites. Also, one sector which has been severely hit by Mr. Trump's tariff was the textile sector, and this is where we can actually try to relate IR with our budget right now. He has proposed 50% tariffs, and these tariffs heavily impacted the textile sector. Lots of orders internationally have been cancelled in this sector, and that is why we are trying to build a resilient textile sector by trying to have an integrated kind of an program for the textile sector. So this integrated program has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 components. Firstly, the National Fiber Scheme, in which we are trying to have self-resilience in silk, wool, jute, man-made fibers. Expansion and employment will be given in the forms of loans and subsidies to the various MSMEs who are operating in the textile sector. The textile sector and the MSMEs combined, they have the second largest employee in the entire country. Just imagine the strength of the entire sector, and also maybe the possible impact of this 50% tariffs. Also, this is where we are also trying to boost the handloom sector and the handicraft sector, where there are so many traditional artisans. We also are focusing on the Tex Eco initiative, where we are trying to promote sustainable textiles using sustainable practices, focusing on the environmental and various other climate obligations. And we have the Samarth 2.0, where we are trying to boost the skilling initiative in the textile sector by partnering with industry and the various institutes. Now, we have various other kind of initiatives too. For example, we are trying to have a boost to the electronics components manufacturing scheme by actually spending more capital subsidy and more loans on the raw materials, so that the companies can procure raw materials and they can try to boost the supply chain of such electronic components. We are also trying to revive 200 industrial clusters across the country. Dedicated initiative for manufacturing sports goods, because Khelo India initiative also got a new boost in the budget. We are having 3 dedicated chemical parks in the pipeline, so that we can diversify away from the various countries we are dependent on for chemicals, mainly the European countries. Also, these 2 initiatives will be discussed separately in the next articles. Right, we are trying to boost container manufacturing, right, and the various applications that we also see in the MSME sector. For example, a champion MSME scheme has been kind of boosted, where we are trying to have a new 10,000 crore SME growth fund, right, where we are trying to make the SMEs or the various MSMEs in the country self-reliant by making the money that they would receive as loans much more easier. Right? That is where the government is trying to focus on. Apart from this champion initiative, we are also dedicating 2,000 crore towards the Self-Reliant India Fund of 2021, where all of the monies eventually will be going to equity support for the MSMEs, where mainly the owners of the MSMEs, the small MSMEs, they can have much more control over their business and actually try to grow their business. And in this way, they are also trying to, the government of India is also trying to promote corporate mitras, especially in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities, right, in which the MSMEs there need growth and opportunity. That is why the various academic experts and mainly the industrial experts, the leading industries, will be coming to train the MSMEs there in those cities. Perhaps next, the most important initiative for the MSMEs is where the government of India made it mandatory, right, for all the central public sector enterprises or the government enterprises to procure various goods and services of the MSMEs, right, via the trades portal. Now understand trades, which are very simple example. Imagine that there is a very small MSME, right, seller who currently needs cash, right, and the thing is that, maybe there is a very big customer of that MSME, right. They currently are telling that, okay, you give me the goods right now, I will be making the payments within 90 days. But what about the MSMEs and the payment that they would not receive for 90 days? The MSME can tell one thing, okay, that you are going to give me the payment after 90 days. So right now what you do, you give me a bill. I will show the bill to some bank or say some other financial institution, and in the meantime, I will be getting the money from such financiers. So the financiers will be giving the money right now, right? Maybe 80%, 85% of the money right now. And later on, when you will be making the payment after 90 days, make the payment directly to such financiers. So this is exactly what the government of India has done by simplifying this process using an electronic medium. So Trades is an electronic portal where all the MSMEs can go and claim the bills from those very big buyers or say their own customers. They can actually try to trade the bills to the banks and receive the money in their banks, for example, if they need immediate cash. So this process has been simplified right now, and also the major central public sector enterprises right now have to use this kind of portal just to give much more liquidity, money to the MSMEs. Apart from this, if you can see the electronic manufacture component, right, also when we talk about the content manufacture, these are all the ways in which the MSMEs are also trying to contribute in by availing of such budget benefits. Now also this is the first aspect of manufacturing that we have kind of considered. Right now, when we talk about the infrastructure and logistics, this is where, the government of India is trying to push a lot of money towards new freight corridors. For example, the Dankuni to Surat corridor, that is the east to west corridor. We are also trying to boost the waterways by having 20 new nationalized waterways, that is utilizing the river waters very well, according to the likes of some major European countries, in which they have tried to boost a lot of their river connections. So, and also if you can see here, these are the growth corridors which the government of India is talking about, right? For example, we are trying to have the East Coast Industrial Corridor in Bihar, Bengal, Odisha, Jharkhand and Andhra Pradesh. If you can see, these are the growth corridors, and also these are the areas which have suffered perhaps the most since independence due to the lack of heavily sophisticated ports since independence, right? And also, the port development along this entire East Coast started just around 10 years ago or say 15 years ago, right? Not much of initiatives and funds were actually spent here. So this is exactly why also the government is launching this rare earth corridor in Odisha, Kerala, Andhra and Tamil Nadu, right? So these are the various areas which will be gaining from these massive boost in capital expenditure. If you can see, this is a 6 times increase from 2015 financial year. Also, if you can see, the defense budget has been boosted since Operation Sindoor. Also, if you can see, the various funds that the government is spending mainly on infrastructure, that is around 0.6% of GDP right now. Also, manufacturing is 0.35%, agriculture, health, and also when we talk about digital education in this particular budget, we are talking about these amounts of infrastructural spending. Also, there is a new initiative of city economic regions where 5,000 crore will be given to some cities according to their regions, and where the regions will be selected according to a challenge mode. This will be almost like an auction where the various state governments, they can present their developmental models to attract more funds. Now, coming to the second Kartavya, there are so many initiatives here. All of you, these initiatives will be there in your handout. If you can see here, the main goal here is to empower the people. People such as youth, women and professionals. For example, firstly, if you can see, we are trying to boost the service sector, right? And this is where we are trying to have education to employment and enterprise standing committee which will be recommending various recommendations to boost the same. and have various policy implications. Also, we are trying to establish allied health professionals in 10 selected disciplines, and this will be focusing on non-core applications of health sector, right? For example, say various amounts of skin care and various other cosmetic and various other surgeries, all those will be promoted. Also, when we are talking about the care ecosystem, right, the care that our elderly citizens need at various NGOs or various nursing homes or various old age homes, that also will be kind of taken up via training initiatives according to the National Skill Qualification Framework. Also, when we talk about the medical tourism, this will be promoted in 5 hubs in the country, because a lot of medical tourists come into India, especially from Bangladesh. Also, the Ayush ministry has been boosted by upgrading various amounts of facilities there, right? Also, when we talk about the orange economy, which is the creator economy, wherein gaming, content creating on YouTube, Instagram, all those aspects, that will be promoted at the school level right now, and also at colleges, right? Just imagine the amount of intense kind of initiatives there. Also, according to design, a National Institute of Design also will be set up in the eastern part of our region. That is why you can see more amount of regional empowerment is focused on in this budget. Also, sports is not left behind. Sports such as football and various other sports at the national level, they are lagging behind. That is why the government is spending on the same. Also, 5 university townships, girls hostel according to STEM projects in every district, and telescope infrastructure facilities, which we are going to look at the end, all will be set up. Next, to boost tourism, there are slew of initiatives, starting from the India's hosting of the first global Big Cat Summit, 15 archaeological sites development. Also, when we talk about the Buddhist circuits in the Northeast region, and various other initiatives to actually upskill the tour guides, all will be taken up. Now, the third Kartavya is where we talk about the Sabka Saath Sabka Vikas. We are talking about agricultural development, guys, and mainly we are talking about high value agricultural products, maybe perhaps for the very first time. We are talking about developing orchards, walnuts, almonds, pine nuts, coconut production scheme, cashew, cocoa, right? We are also talking about harvesting and production of sandalwood, right? So many applications are being presented right now. Also, we will be focused on a dedicated program for horticulture to produce more amounts of fruits and vegetables, right? Entrepreneurship related schemes will be set up in rural and peri-urban areas. Loans will be given as capital subsidy to actually help the small business owners of such animal husbandry sector to take loans from the banks and develop. Also, a lot of focus has been given to the development of veterinary and para-vet colleges and the overall breeding scenario of the animal husbandry sector. Also, integrated development of 500 reservoirs and Amrit Sarovars, which are actually heritage kind of reservoirs, ponds, mainly in the state of Rajasthan. Also, these will be taken up. Apart from this, a new term which is known as fish FPOs to promote the fisheries sector of our country, because there is a lot of export potential of the fish sector in our countries. Finally, when we talk about integrating technology, we are trying to integrate AgriStack portal and the ICR various packages and portals with AI systems such as the Bharat Vistar, which is also a kind of a AI related multilingual tool which has been introduced in the agricultural sector. Apart from the agricultural sector, we have initiatives focused on women and community in the form of She Mart. This is the self-help enterprises, right, which are actually for the self-help groups under the Lakpati Didi initiative. So there will be a lot of new marts, new shopping centers in localized villages, in localized districts, which will be known as She Marts. Very good initiatives for the various sectors. Also, when we talk about the mental health, it has been focused on via upgrading various institutions, and mainly when we talk about the Eastern India, we have already seen some of the various new initiatives. Also, extra initiatives such as 4,000 new electronic buses, Buddhist circuits, all will be focused upon. Now, when we talk about the part B of the budget, this is where we actually talk about the direct and the indirect taxes. Firstly, when we talk about the direct taxes, reductions in tax collection at source has been proposed, wherein overseas tour packages, education, medical treatment, all have been made much more less expensive, the rates have been reduced to actually boost the spending abroad, right? So you can expect a lot of tourists having more affordable expenditures abroad, mainly on the credit cards, because tax collected at source is a kind of a charge which sometimes the credit cards companies they charge, because the government of India mandates the collection of taxes at the point of some transactions. Also, the securities transaction tax, which is the tax that you have to pay, for example, if you buy some shares and options, futures, right, that has been hiked, which led to the stock market melting. Even today, the stock market is not performing well due to this particular initiative. Also, whenever we buy shares of a particular company, that particular company owners or shareholders sometimes can buy back the shares, right? So you as an investor do not have to pay the taxes separately. Firstly, maybe earlier you used to pay taxes when you used to sell the various shares to the shareholders, and also there is to be multiple amount of tax burdens. So these buybacks will be treated as capital gains right now. So right now only tax will be charged as one-time phenomena. Also, promoters, for example, the company owners, they must be paying an additional buyback tax too in cases of such transactions. Also, the minimum alternate tax, a very important one, has been made the final tax. For example, say guys, here there was a company, say company A, which was taking lots of benefits of exemptions and deductions in taxes. For example, if they actually had a profit of 1000 crore, they are showing profit of only 100 crore, right? Because their clever chartered accountants and corporate lawyers have brought down the tax liability by 900 crore. And this is what happens also. So government actually notices such things. Government told that if you are actually showing a profit, which is your actual profit, you generally have to pay around 20% corporate tax. That would come around 200 crore revenue for the government, right? But there are so many exemptions that the government of India also provides to the corporate offices, due to which, they use such clever tactics. So government told that, okay, you have to pay a minimum alternate tax, that whatever is the profit of on your books, that is known as book profit, you have to pay. Earlier it was 15%, right now it has been brought down to 14%. So if your book profit is 100 crore, right, you have to pay, for example, 14% of the same. So this is right now treated as a final tax, because due to various taxation compliances, some of the excess amounts or less amounts were carried forward to the next financial year. That would not happen under MAT anymore, because MAT will be the final tax. Also, Government of India is proposing a lot of initiatives for the IT sector right now. It is right now trying to categorize the entire IT sector as IT services, whether it is belonging to software, ITES, KPO or R&D, research and development, right? Also, the Government of India is trying to simplify the tax proposals for major MNCs in the form of giving tax certainty in the form of safe harbor, right? Safe harbor margin has been fixed at 15.5% and companies' margins have been increased to 2000 crore just to actually help the various taxpayers to follow simplified predetermined rules as a form of safe harbor provisions. Because earlier what used to happen, guys, for example, if Google was situated at the US, right? Now, if there is a service provider, Indian service provider, right, in India of Google, right? So, Google, to escape taxes, they would tell the service provider to charge less money on the bills that it would send to Google, right? So that is where, government thought that, okay, these less bills are actually cheating me of my own tax revenue. So let us actually fix a 15.5% margin for businesses who have been doing 2000 crore, right, for 5 years. So this will give a safe harbor so that further on related to such bills, there should not be any court cases, new litigation cases and so on. So government wants to avoid such things, especially right now under Donald Trump, right? He also complained of such things from India. Maybe India is trying to grant that. And such bills and such agreements fall under advanced pricing agreements. And right now government would be trying to simplify this kind of agreements on a faster basis, right? Now, also when we talk about attracting global business, we are giving tax holiday till 2047 to the various data centers, as you can see, which have increased investments in the country over a period of time. Also, we are giving a 5-year tax exemptions on the foreign income for non-resident experts who have been working in India. So we want to attract more people from the US, Europe, maybe even various Southeast Asian countries to come and work in India. So we are trying to attract global talent too. And when we talk about the indirect taxes, finally, right, we are trying to conclude part B here. We are talking about the customs and the imports, right? We are actually trying to give exemptions for various lithium ion batteries, sodium antimonide, which is important for solar glass industry, nuclear power projects extended till 2035, even biogas. So all of these things have been exempted from such customs. Also, the aviation industry is seeing duty exemption on parts for manufacturing planes, both civil and defense planes in the country, and also for maintenance, repair and overhaul, which is a kind of a service sector which India is trying to promote in the aviation sector. This is also something which the government of India has exempted. And finally, for us, what the government do? Government tried to reduce various import duties on the day-to-day services and the goods to 10%. Also, government has made these rare diseases or say the cancer-related drugs much more cheaper. So, this was actually a complete breakdown of the budget. If you can see, these are all the expenditures. Also, there is a mains practice question summarizing all these initiatives. You can let me know in the comments below. Now we are going to understanding what to expect from the budget in the form of analysis. So, the Hindu and the Indian Express kind of praise the government of India for having a long-term vision of our Indian expenditures and pertaining mainly to the capital side. So let us quickly understand the main analysis of the budget here, because again, there can be various questions directly and indirectly related to this. Also, you can use the content here to write answers in other economics answers too. Now, firstly, Udit Mishra from the Indian Express, who is a distinguished author on major economic topics, he is talking about two important aspects. Firstly, when we are talking about the economy, we have to see economy from a real and a nominal GDP lens. We all know, guys, that for example, when we talk about the major international scenarios where we are talking about Indian economy and its performance, World Bank, IMF, everyone is trying to praise India because it is the fastest growing economy in the entire world, with a real GDP growth at 7.4% and a very, very low inflation of around 2%. On the daily essential commodity items, right? It is actually where we can understand that economy of India is right now in a zone which is known as Goldilocks zone, where everything is just right. Everything is making sense in real terms. But another economists or another camp of economists are also telling that nominal growth is also important to be looked at, because if we aspire to become a developed country by 2047, we need to grow our nominal GDP annually by 12%. This is, a global benchmark that according to various reports, India must achieve if we want to become a developed country. But what is the nominal growth as of now, guys? It is only 8%. That means the money value of the various goods, which is actually calculated when we talk about the nominal GDP, right? When we talk about the nominal GDP, we talk about the nominal or the money value of the goods. That means the money value of the goods are not selling well, right? That means there is a problem with the demand. That means that prices and incomes aren't rising that much, which would we generally expect it to be if we want to aspire to be a Vikshit Bharat. So that is why if we understand that if we are only growing at 8%, we are maybe not having enough tax collection, and if we do not have enough tax collection right now, we will not be able to spend money or borrow money tomorrow. So this is exactly what we are worried about, and this is why the government as of now is taking a U-turn. Why? Because the government over the last 3 years in their budget, they have cut income tax. For example, in the last budget, right, we have cut down the income tax for various people. Right now in this budget, if you see, many people are complaining that income taxes are not reduced at all. What is the budget all for? Also, when we talk about the GST, which was recently rationalized, right, you have seen how many goods were made much more cheaper, right? Also, in 2019, there were corporate tax cuts for the business houses, right? All of these things the previous budgets thought of undertaking to boost demand in the country so that people actually spend their money and go to the markets and buy various goods and services. The firms, the companies, they would earn more revenues, they would try to invest more, and hence the GDP would grow nominally at 12%. But this was not happening. This is not happening right now. This is the result where we can actually see that private final consumption, or simply the amount of money we are trying to spend on the various goods and services, education, health, essential commodities, they are increasing according to various quarters of our GDP. For example, if you can look at the 2025 quarters and also financial year 2026 quarters, we are seeing increase in demand of the people. But if you see there is not a consistent increase, or the trend is not very well, that means people are not spending too much of money. That means we have a problem in the demand side, right? Also, if you see, most of the GDP growth projections for our financial year 2026 by Fitch Ratings, Standard and Poor, right, IMF, World Bank, ADB, RBI, even our own Economic Survey Ministry of Finance, they are telling that GDP would grow, roughly around in the range of 7% or kind of in that range. While that is a real GDP, that is actually good for economic analysis. But in nominal terms, in when we talk about the market terms, when we talk about demand terms, that is not growing. And that is why this new strategy of boosting, for example, the biopharma industry, the semiconductor, electronics, textiles, rare earth, etc., they are all undertaken just to increase the supply side, the production side, so that we help the various private sector to produce more in the country, have more profits, invest those profits in India, maybe perhaps attract more foreign investments, and then we can have a better picture. Now, this was about how we are trying to boost the supply side. Now, the government is also trying to reduce the various deficits. As you can see, as we have already discussed, we are successfully declining the amount of deficits that we are having over the years. Now, we have successfully hit the target that we set in budget 2025 of having 4.4. We achieved that as of now. We achieved the fiscal deficit at 4.3 as of now, right? So how did we do? Did we earn more revenues? If you see at the income tax and the GST, right, revenues were not the reason, right? Revenues were not the reason, but massive cuts were made to health, education and urban development, guys. Now this is a serious concern, guys. Many economists are very concerned about this. Opposition parties and various other experts are concerned about this. Because the government is as of now undergoing fiscal consolidation. We are trying to spend less money. We are now trying not to spend too much of money on wasteful services, on wasteful government schemes. So we are trying to rationalize them. We are trying to cut down those expenditures. And also, the second reason is that we tried to borrow less. We decreased our borrowings, and we have to understand, whenever we decrease borrowings, we spend less on health, education and urban infrastructure, right? So this is what we have to understand. But on the other hand, we have increased the capital expenditure, correct? We also have tried to bring in a new target, that is the debt to GDP ratio. We are not trying to target fiscal deficit anymore. We are trying to target the main aspect of 55.6% debt to GDP ratio, right? And fiscal deficit is right now targeted, and that target has been completed too. So this was actually how the deficit was done. Now when we talk about the state government or the fiscal federalism side, the central government, right now, by now you have understood that it is trying to cut down the money, right? On the other hand, the states are trying to complain that, the state governments as of 2022 financial year are having 3.2% of fiscal deficit as a percent of their GDP, right? So also you have to understand that the debt trap of the various state governments is close to 28% of the GDP. Even some state governments are so surprised that this is perhaps one of the very few instances of budget where no politically motivated schemes were also announced, right? Elections are yet to happen in West Bengal and in so many other states, right? So we can actually appreciate the intention of the government right now, that this is not a populist budget. This is a budget to actually navigate the complex world we are living right now. This Trump world, this conflict-ridden world, and also the money that we owe a lot in forms of interest payment, interest of past loans that we have taken. This is why we are not trying to spend a lot of money. But on the other hand, you see, we are trying to boost on various other instances where the state governments can benefit in the long term. For example, if we set up rare earth initiative, right, 7 economic regions in various cities, right, 16 Finance Commission has recommended grants which are only seeing uptick. Also, if you see the 16th Finance Commission recommendations according to the various states, right, of Karnataka, Kerala, Andhra Pradesh and so many other states, right. So this is where you see the South Indian states are getting higher, kind of say revenues from that. Also, the North Indian state, the Hindi heartland are seeing dip, right. So these are the various ways, other ways in which the state governments are also receiving the money from. Now, due to the paucity of time, we are not able to discuss this in a great detail, the various provisions of 16th Finance Commission. But my point of telling you this, that the state finances will still be supported over a long period of time through such long initiatives. And also, when we talk about the capital expenditure and the industry, this is exactly where we understand that we have undertaken so many initiatives. Also, if you look at the capital expenditure side, the government is actually spending a lot on railways and roads. If you can see, railways and roads are actually having a lot of budget kind of say announcements, apart from say telecom, power or housing sector, right. Now, if you also see new projects in railways such as 7 high-speed rail corridors, dedicated freight corridors, these are all actually aimed at boosting the future capabilities of India so that we become a developed country. By 2047, also we are trying to have an industrial revival via MSMEs, via cluster reset and so many other initiatives. So this was exactly what we had in mind for the infrastructural sector as of now domestically. Right now, we also have the Donald Trump tariff threat always, right, due to which recently the Canadian Prime Minister made a brilliant speech, guys. All of you please go and watch his 10 or 15 minutes of speech, right, on what is the scenario of the global world right now, where we are right now, what we are doing, what we are aspiring for, what the middle powers such as Canada, such as India also should be aspiring for. So this is perhaps one of the greatest speech as of now of 21st century. I can easily tell that. If some of you have watched it, you let me know in the comments below and what you thought of it. Now, we are living in a world where the old global order is broken according to our Canadian Prime Minister. Our old global order is broken. Rules-based global order is broken. Countries such as US and China time and again tries to bully other countries. US is right now imposing tariffs. China is being hostile on territories. What to do? We have to take a balanced approach, right? On the Chinese side, I'm coming to the next article, but on the US side, we are trying to balance US as of now. We are trying to give them data center and the tax holidays that they have demanded so many times, right? We have done that. And in the meantime, if we are giving 2047 as an income tax holiday for them, right? In the meantime, we are attracting more global investment. We are attracting more FDI. We are attracting better global talent. So in the long term, it will be good for us only. Let the US demand all those things. We will be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Also, US has been asking a lot of concessions in our own special economic zones, right? So that is why we have also tried to special one-time measure to actually increase sales in manufacturing units in the SEZs, and this is where we have to decrease the various tariffs in our SEZs. So this is what we are actually doing right now. Also, US demanded so many things in our aviation sector, as we have seen already, right? For example, we are trying to boost the maintenance, repair and operations say of the aviation sector by giving them more initiatives. We are trying to make the nuclear energy much more say accessible, right? We already have the Shanti Act of 2025 where private players will be brought in the nuclear sector, where the US can actually bring their own technologies. At the end, in the long term, we will be able to decarbonize our sector and we will be improving our investments. So it is actually good for us, and also it will be making the US in the meantime a little bit content. On the other hand, if you see the textile sector, as we have already discussed previously, it is actually where they need a lot of money because tariffs have impacted this sector the most. So this was all of the analysts that we were trying to do as of now. So this was actually the comprehensive analysis we tried to do. Now one more aspect which was left is the climate aspect. You know, the funds related to reducing or reduction of pollution, or the various aspects of reducing various environmental impacts have been reduced, and this is where even the Delhi government did not receive enough funds for coping up with air pollution. So this is one area which I felt, and also various other experts felt, that this is a major concern, because India cannot go, too far by neglecting environmental concerns. So this is where maybe more funds are needed here. But as of now, this was a complete analysis, right? Apart from this, you can also see a new initiative for carbon capture, utilization and storage in the power, steel, cement, refineries and chemical sector. So this was all for it. Now you attempt this question finally. Now you can let me know the answers in the comment below. We will finally go on to the prelims pointers. The first prelim pointer here is where Indian government has launched the India Semiconductor Mission 2.0, which is a very major initiative under deep tech manufacturing. Deep technology means the technologies of artificial intelligence, data centers, machine learning, semiconductors, rare earth and various other equipments which actually are futuristic. So this is where India is trying to boost its own value chain. That is where, firstly, when we talk about the semiconductor, guys, semiconductor is actually made from polycrystalline silicon. Then it is kind of refined through various processes, right? Finally, when we talk about the entire processes, it takes around 12 to 14 steps. And in all of these steps, there is not one single country which is kind of dominating, all of the, say, production process of semiconductor. When we talk about the design, it is dominated by the US or UK. Most of the semiconductors and the chips, even the smartphone that on which you are watching me on, is made of various chips which are maybe manufactured in China or Taiwan, right? But designed in the US or UK. Because designing requires high level of expertise, simulations, funding, which are easily available in the developed economies. Next, the raw materials come from Japan and China. All the raw materials, silicon and the various other equipments, they come from Japan and China. Also, equipment manufacturing, they come from, for example, Netherlands. Also, the fabrication, this is actually where finally the chips are made, right? Finally, after designing raw materials and all of those things, they are made at various factories. So this is actually dominated by Taiwan, by TSMC. You may have heard about this company a lot because they have signed a lot of deals with India too. I'm going to show you at the end. And at the end of the day, assembly, testing, marking, packaging, these are the various other countries such as China, Malaysia, Vietnam, where we do not need a lot of value additions in this fourth and the fifth stages, and that is why this can be undertaken by various such countries. And this is where our Semiconductor Mission 2.0 is coming into picture, because the Semiconductor Mission 1.0 actually focus on the steps number 4 and 5, right? But right now we are trying to focus on the entire ecosystem, right? When we talk about, the entire semiconductors, from the various design to raw materials to various other methods that we have seen here, all of them are right now integrated under this 2.0 ecosystem, wherein we are trying to even design the entire semiconductors in India so that we need to have better intellectual property rights, correct? Also, we are trying to give capital support. The government will be giving loan support, money to various MSMEs maybe, or various startups maybe, or various new foreign direct investment. For raw materials, even there are so many gases which are used in semiconductors to keep the silicon and the various wafers very, very clean, and also equipments. So allocation of 1,000 crore has been given to actually make India move from just being a manufacturer, final end manufacturer of semiconductors, to actually become a supply chain dominator in the near future. And this is where so many of semiconductor factories and agreements will be set up at various state governments in the country, right? Starting from equipments and materials, full stack design, that means the entire design using complicated softwares, using simulations, funds, everything will come from India. Everything will come from our own motherland. Also, supply chain resilience by negotiating with partners, by bringing in investors, by actually looking into the supply chain of the raw materials and negotiating a deal with them. So these are all the things. Also, finally, at the end of the day, research and development is very important. Mainly at IITs, this money will be flowing into, and various other universities which promote research of semiconductors to actually manufacture indigenous chips. This all will be undertaken majorly because the Indian Semiconductor Mission 1.0 was simply a success, because as of now 10 plants are operating under the initiative of the Semiconductor Mission 1.0. Wherein Tata PSMB, right, India's first commercial fabricator was set up at Dholera. $11 billion were invested, right? Micron technology came in Gujarat, Sanad region. Also, the CG Power set up the plants to actually design and maintain and also look into the overall supply chain of the semiconductors, mainly focus on the 4th and 5th stages as we have discussed previously. Also, if you have seen, Telangana, Orissa, Punjab, Andhra Pradesh, all the states of India are attracting semiconductor industries. So what does this mean? This means that these industries will be creating new jobs, will be creating new skills, will be leading to technological transfer, will be leading to making the state GDP much more greater. So this is exactly why we are trying to go beyond this kind of, say, Semiconductor 1 initiative to 2.0, because recently also, as you have seen, the Shakti and Vega chips are India's own homegrown microprocessors. So it is a very proud moment for India to actually come and manufacture microprocessors right now. Also, if you can see, there are so many classes of processors which are under development right now, correct? So these are the various Shakti processors into 3 classes which are extremely crucial for your prelims knowledge, guys. So this was all for this article. We will be now moving on to the next prelims pointer. So the finance minister has announced rare earth corridors. Let us look into what it is and how it will be leading to make India having a competition ground with China. So firstly, rare earth materials are actually not rare, guys. When anyone asks you, are they really rare? They are not rare. They are found abundantly on the earth's crust throughout the world, as you can see here. Even in India, we have a lot of them, right? They are actually a set of 17 elements: lanthanides, scandium and yttrium, right? As you can see, these are the various rare earth elements. They are not rare to find, but they are rare to process them, to extract them, to make them commercially available so that they serve as vitamins of modern industry. Guys, they are known as vitamins of modern industry, similar to the functions that vitamins do to our own body, right? Vitamin A, B, C, D and various other vitamins, right? They make us free from various diseases. They give various nutritions. Similarly, rare earth materials, right? They are those materials which power your electronic devices, right? Which actually have a lot of implications in mostly making strong and powerful magnets that actually are used in so many heavy industrial applications and major modern deep technologies. So this is exactly what brings us to the Indian context, guys. For example, in India we have something which is known as beach sand materials such as thorium, titanium, zirconium, gamete, sillimanite. So these are all, you know, kind of beach sand minerals, and this is exactly where we find the rare earth materials, right? So one of these actually contain monazite. Monazite contains thorium and uranium, right, which are actually a very key source of the rare earth minerals. And if you see along the entire eastern coast, this is quite of a predominant, say, resource that we have. This is a kind of a hidden resource that has been gifted to us across the entire eastern coast and also the western coast. So this is where we have to understand monazite sand are a phosphate mineral found in abundant numbers in Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Orissa and Andhra Pradesh. So at a time when China is dominating the supply chain, why we are, you know, left behind? Why we are not using the vast sands of our country? If you know, sands do not have any limit, right? And if you go on to excavate such monazite sand minerals, we can only get more and more of such, rare earth materials, which can be even much more instrumental in our semiconductor industry, for example, in the previous article. But the major thing is that, the monazite is also a source of thorium and uranium. Uranium is particularly radioactive. So these monazite sands are strictly regulated by the Department of Atomic Energy. So the budget here is trying to simplify this. So we are trying to have corridors in 4 states with 2 intentions. Firstly, to have much more rare earth permanent magnets, right? We have to manufacture permanent magnets which are actually used in so many other applications, mainly various electronic components. So this is where we will be trying to attract so many companies. We have a target to manufacture 6,000 million metric tons per annum, where we are trying to attract 5 companies who will be targeting 1,200 MTPA, right? And they will be getting incentive of 6,450 crores. Just similar to the PLI scheme, they have to manufacture and sell more of the permanent magnets, then they will be getting this money. So doing business, ease of doing business has been subsidized. Also, capital subsidy to buy new machines, new components to set up this factory, 750 crore will be given for that. And exactly these states were chosen. These areas were chosen. So do remember the names of these areas, because UPSC prelims can give you the names and they can actually ask these are associated with which government initiative. Also, finally, we have to break down the supply chain problem of China, because China is having the monopoly of 90% of the rare earth processing, magnet manufacturing, and also China time to time threatens other countries such as Japan, even US, that they would stop the supply of such, say rare earth to rest of the world. And then the rest of the world can see inflation, can see price rise in the semiconductor industry or say in the electronic industry. So that is why India is stepping in the game, right? Also, India imports majority of the rare earth materials and also the magnets, and the demand will increase by 2 times. So in the future, we are going to spend more money. But that is why we are trying to actually focus on manufacturing various kinds of permanent magnets and rare earth materials in India itself, for EVs, for wind turbines, for even defense equipments, in which they are actually very much used. Thirdly, when we talk about the upstream sources such as the mining, India Rare Earth Limited is a PSU which undertakes the mining of the monazite sand and hence extract the so many other rare earth materials, right? So we have to diversify, maybe also trying to do the same under PPP model, so that we can also bring in the private sector. Never standing the same, we have to understand we have atomic sources of uranium too. We have to find out the guidelines for that. Also, we have to undertake the processing on a very serious vein, because China has dominated the processing side. We have to understand the processing of rare earth materials are actually heavily polluting and complex. So we need better technology and funding for the same. And for the downstream, we have actually launched this initiative. So let us have a comprehensive development of the rare earth scenario as of now. Now we'll be moving on to the next prelims pointer. Guys, we are right now in this article moving away from the budget, economics and all those numbers, right, we have discussed so far. We are right now going to a polity article, where we are talking about the phone tapping case. Not in details, we are going to talk not about the political cases here. We are going to understand the laws and the institutions which is responsible for regulating the phone tapping in the country. Now, guys, this is a very important prelims article, guys, because in the prelims examination, they can give you various scenarios. They can give you so many, legislations and the provisions regarding phone tapping in the country. Firstly, there are so many signs, if you can see, if you see some of the signs, maybe because you are a very rich person or you are a very influential person, and that is why maybe your phone is being tapped, right? So if you see these signs, you must be very worried, because your phone maybe is being tapped. And phone tapping or telephonic surveillance or wiretapping, as it was earlier known, because majorly the spy movies and all of those movies, as you have seen in the recent times also, they rely on phone tapping. The story plot relies on phone tapping, right? Though it means that you are trying to intercept private telephone conversations without knowledge or consent of the person being monitored. Now, if you are doing it, it is illegal. But if the government is doing it, is doing in national interest, maintaining public order, preventing crime, and also maintaining friendly relations with other countries. So mainly, if you understand, the government uses phone tapping for espionage purposes. For example, the government can actually look into phone tapping for terrorism aspects, for anti-social aspects, for any kind of, say, relations, for any kind of event that can lead to the deterioration of relations with other countries. So this is exactly what we have to understand. Phone tapping is the need of hour only in the extreme and rarest of rarest occasions, right? And that is why sometimes those rare occasions become occasions and frequent occasions also, and which brings us to the main topic of citizens' privacy rights and states' security powers. So in the country we have legal framework for phone tapping only in extreme cases. For example, we have the Indian Telegraph Act of 1885 to tap voice calls, even intercept SMS. IThe Act 2000 is looking at digital communications such as emails and WhatsApp. We also have the Indian Post Act of 1898, which is the oldest provision. Right now it is no longer used or rarely used to intercept letters. I mean physical letters, mails, right, or documents or packages, right? But perhaps the most important section is the Telegraph Act 1985 section 5 subclause 2. It tells that on public emergency or interest of public safety, if it is necessary or expedient in the interest of sovereignty, security of the country or friendly relations, to prevent, we can do this kind of phone tapping, right? But whatever phone tapping will happen, according to this section, it must be authorized in writing according to some competent authority, and also there must be reasonable restrictions too. For example, if someone is tapping or if the government is tapping a criminal's phone, that criminal must be doing a very, very serious crime, right? So that thing must be kept in mind, because we have freedom of speech and right to privacy, as it was emphasized in the Puttaswamy case. Now, in a separate case in 1997, the Supreme Court actually, in a very landmark judgment, laid down various procedural safeguards. Firstly, only Home Secretary at the state and the central level can approve this phone tapping. And whatever approvals have been done before, they must be reviewed within 2 months. The review committee must be consisting of cabinet secretary guys, law secretary, telecom secretary, right? Whether you are investigating a phone tap in the state government or at the central government, all of these people must be there in the meeting, and they must be trying to review whether it was just or not. Also, necessity test should be done. Phone tapping only should be done if no other means are left. If the government does not have any other left, sending spies, IB, RAW, they cannot extract any information physically, then we have to go for this. Also, all documentation must be recorded, all approvals must be done, and in a very justified way. And at the end of the day, you have to understand that, as a part of this landmark Supreme Court judgment, this has been integrated in the Indian Telegraph rules. And if any kind of rules here are violated, right? And finally, if the authorities at the state level, such as the police authorities or the central authorities, they do not follow these provisions, they kind of will be facing the scrutiny of the court. And, any kind of evidence, whether it is by illegal phone tapping, will not be admissible in court, and the authorities will be grounded up. So now we'll be moving on to the next one. The next article is actually on the Saraswati Sindhu Sabhyata, or the government of India, which is right now referring to the Indus Valley civilization. Here in this one, we are going to look at Rakhigarhi. Rakhigarhi actually is one of those sites which have been given extra funds under this budget to restore and maintain properly. Now, this is not a new scheme in this budget. This is actually a very old scheme from 2020, right? So, for example, Rakhigarhi, Hastinapur, Dholavira, Shivsagar in Assam, which is trying to preserve the Ahom dynasty heritage, and also the Adi Channalur, which is also a site of ancient burial site in Tamil Nadu. Correct? So in this current budget, this list has been expanded, but this is what is known as the iconic site scheme, where the government will be actually developing these sites with reference to their on-site infrastructure and converting them into on-site museum itself. So simply, for example, if you go to Rakhigarhi, you will see ruins and mounds. So you can actually move across the mounds and that will be a kind of a living museum, right? So all the sites have their own precious heritage, and this is why we have the Rakhigarhi in the news right now. You know, Rakhigarhi is the largest Harappan site in Indian subcontinent as of now, whatever has been discovered. Because you know guys, whatever Indus Valley civilization sites that we see in India and Pakistan both, right? Many of the sites which are not yet discovered may be even larger. But as of now, it is the largest in the Indian subcontinent as of now. Also, if you can see, Rakhigarhi dates back into, you know, thousands of years ago into the past. If you see, you know, it is actually in the district of Hisar in Haryana. And such trenches and such areas which have been excavated, these show a high amount of organization of mounds. If you can see in this way, this is the Rakhigarhi in Haryana and the Mohenjo-daro in Pakistan. So see the kind of similarities that you can see, right? Also, township in Rakhigarhi was highly planned. Now, what the issue is that, you know, the central government is kind of denoting around 200 crore for the preservation of such sites. But the state government on itself have already spent 23 crore based on museum, based on so many other technology and the restoration facilities. So the state government of Haryana actually performed quite well. But the Archaeological Survey of India, right, they did not kind of do the kind of repair, maintenance, infrastructural boost as it was promised, because around 500 crore was given in 5 years. But ASI spent only paltry 1 crore. That means ASI only does routine maintenance, just repairing the say sites or painting the walls or, you know, maintaining the structures, not going beyond that, you know. So they are only focused on excavation, boundary walls, site amenities, right? No central budget or say no progress has been done in maintaining those things. On the other hand, hotels, hostels, guest houses, roads, connectivity, everything is done by the state government of Haryana. So this is exactly why the people there are not happy. And this is exactly why IVC as a whole, and mainly the Indian sites of IVC as a whole for your prelims becomes very important. So as of now, after the session today, open your theme 1 NCERT of class 12 and look at the various sites of the IVC. Now we'll be moving on to the last article of the day. So guys, we are focusing on one major article and a major initiative to boost the space and astronomy sector in the country, because recently the allocation for Jammu and Kashmir is marginally increased from the last financial year, and a majority of them will be spent to actually improve large telescopes and building actually one observatory in Amravati. Now, when we talk about the Ladakh region, it is actually known as the Dark Sky Reserve, because if you have seen the geography of Ladakh, it is actually located 4,500 meters above the sea level. Especially at locations at Hanle and Merak in Ladakh, these are areas with extremely clear skies at a very high altitude, where we have the dark sky advantage. Light pollution is extremely low because human settlements there are very rare. Atmosphere is very dry, you know, and also the place there is monsoon free. Little rainfall means little clouds. Little clouds means you can have a unobstructed view of the night sky, which is where the telescopes thrive. The telescopes, for example, the first project, the National Large Solar Telescope, by the name you can understand, we are trying to complement it with Aditya L1 satellite. Aditya L1 is located in space, but the National Large Telescope, Solar Telescope, will be a sun watcher from the ground. So this telescope will be at Hanle, and it is near the Pangong Tso Lake, and it will be a 2-meter class telescope. It determines the classes of telescope, determines the size of the mirrors of the telescope, and it will be one of the Asia's largest telescope when it will be completed. The resolution is 50 km, that means it will be giving us very sharp images of the sun, and also the speed will be 1 millisecond, that means it will be refreshing every 1 millisecond and will be giving us accurate pictures. So the data With reference to the magnetic field, spectrography on the ground will be better generated, and also the combining with the space data with reference to UV, X-ray that the IThe L1 will be scanning, it will be complementing each other. Next, we have the National Large Optical Infrared Telescope. It is located at Hanle and it will be a type 10 meter class telescope where we will be having this segmented mirror technology, which is almost like the James Webb Space Telescope as we have seen. So we are trying to use so many combination of mirrors as a form of magnifying and zooming into the various space objects, such as we can use it to study the early universe, also the exoplanets, right, or the planets which are actually outside our solar systems and have kind of signs of life. Correct? And this is mainly to link with a 30 meter telescope, which is an international collaboration of telescope, and it is expected to be ready in 10 years. Apart from this, we can also see the major Indian telescope giants across the entire country. So it is for your own prelims pointers, and the various other projects, for example, Himalayan Chandra telescope upgrade will be done because it has been operational since 2001 and it is remotely operated from Bangalore, right, using satellite connectivity. And at the end, there will be a Cosmos Planetarium to boost astronomical interest and curiosity amongst the common citizen, the youth. It will be set up at Amravati, Andhra Pradesh, and it will be based on the Mysuru Cosmos facility. And here we come at the end of the discussion today. It was a very long one, but a very essential one. I thank you all for being a very patient audience. Please do attempt the quiz which is following up. Till we meet again, all the best and best of luck. Thank you.